Hey there, welcome to Experts on Purpose. In today's episode, we have a very special guest. His name is Alan Lazaros. Alan is the host of Next Level University, which is a global top 100 self improvement podcast with more than 700 episodes and listeners from more than 100 countries. He's also a business coach and a consultant and has generated more than $5 million in client revenue. Hey, Alan, welcome to Experts on Purpose.
Experts on Purpose. I love the name. And I hope that I'm an expert, but I know that I'm on purpose. So thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I listened to your show earlier on my way to the studio today. And I think you have a lot of passion and a big heart. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Alan. You're definitely an expert, and that's why you're here to add more value to people who want to be experts on purpose, just like you. So tell me, Alan, how did it all begin? Like, what's the backstory behind starting your business, which is based on your expertise?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you the short version, but it starts very, very young.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 32 years old right now, and I recently went back to my hometown, and I ended up going fishing on Father's Day. Kevin and I always spend Father's Day together because both of us grew up without fathers, and we went fishing. I grew up on a small lake, big pond, and we went fishing there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told Kev, I said, honestly, I feel like I'm rereading the book of my life so that I can take the last 32 years and invest them into my 33rd year. My birthday's in November. And so I'll kind of take you back through what I've been understanding now in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 2 years old. My father is 28 years old. My father passes away in a car accident. I have an older sister and a mother. And so I kind of grew up with two moms. My older sister was 3 years older and she always took good care of me. And then my mother as well. And I had a stepdad from age 3 to 14, and my stepdad left at 14. But the important pieces of my story in hindsight are, number one, I was no stranger to adversity because obviously my father passing away and my mom basically had two children and she didn't anticipate that. And she had very little choices. And she wishes that she had taken her academics more seriously because she was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And my father was the one who was making the income. And when he passed away, fortunately, he did have life insurance. But when he passed away, my mom didn't have a lot of choices.
Right.
And so when I was very, very young, I remember my mom telling me this one simple principle that I still think is the most important principle. The more and more I study, the more and more this principle is just true. She said, Alan, you can be a CEO or you can be a farmer, and I'm going to love you either way. But if you aim high, you can wake up one day. Like if you're a CEO, you can wake up one day and decide to be a farmer, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. So she said, life is about choices. Aim high in life and you'll have choices. And I just feel so strongly about that. And there's this great quote that I love that Les Brown says. He says, we don't fail in life because we aim too high and miss. We actually fail in life because we aim too low and we hit. And so I've always aimed high, and I thank my mom for that. Fast forward. I did awesome in school because my mom correlated school and education with having choices.
Right.
And it's 8th grade. And up to this point, I'd gotten all A's, maybe a couple B's. And she basically said, okay, Alan, I'm going to take a chance on you. I'm going to let you take 8th grade off. Not off as in I don't go to school. By law, I had to go to school. But like, you don't have to try. C's, D's, and B's in 8th grade. All A's pretty much up to that point. As long as you promise me that you get the President's Award in high school. The President's Award in high school was basically you need a 95 or above out of 100 GPA for every single report card for all 4 years. So 4 report cards per year, 16 report cards straight. You can't get below a 95. I got straight A's all through high school, except for 1 B+ in honors English. And I never took honors English again. But anyway, so I did end up getting the President's Award. And basically, circle back, I think I'm like 12. And again, only in hindsight did I understand what she was doing. But I'm 12 and we're driving in her black BMW. It was like an older one, but it was really nice. And we're driving past Worcester Polytechnic Institute. So this studio is actually in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm actually not far from WPI, which is my alma mater. But I'm 12 at the time, anywhere 10 to 12. I'm not 100% sure. But I remember driving past the bottom of the hill. That's what they call it, the hill at WPI. And there's the WPI sign, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And it's kind of like a mini MIT for people who don't know. It's kind of like a a less world-renowned MIT, basically.
Got it.
And so at the time, my uncle Merle was actually the track and field coach for 25 years, I think 30 years there. And as a matter of fact, he's since passed, and they named the field after him. It's called Norcross Field, Norcross, Merle Norcross. And so anyways, she basically said, Alan, you're really good at math. You should be an engineer. Engineers make a lot of money. And if you make a lot of money, you'll have choices. And so I was like, yep, awesome. So again, straight A's through high school. I'm applied at WPI. I get in. I do electrical and computer engineering at WPI. And so for those of you who are engineers out there, absolutely brutal. Oh my God, absolutely brutal. So went from straight A's in high school, pretty academically inclined, to like, oh my God, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I get to corporate America and I'm designing circuits behind a desk for a company called Tyco Safety Products. I realized really quickly that I am extroverted. I probably should have learned that earlier. And I don't want to sit behind a desk my whole life. So I go back for my master's in business administration, my MBA. And at the time, my dream was to be like Steve Jobs. I wanted to be a Fortune 500 CEO in America, that whole American dream thing. And I looked it up. And apparently, at the time, a large percentage, I think 60% plus of CEOs in America had a engineering undergrad with an MBA combination. So I go get my MBA, go into corporate America. I started a little company called Campus Libre with some of my friends. I thought we were going to do awesome. That ended up breaking up. I worked for a company called Oz Development. I worked for iRobot for a time. I worked for a company called Cognex eventually. So I did a lot of job hopping. I was also in LA for a time as well, for like a 3-month period. But I did a lot of soul searching, a lot of job hopping. And I needed to get out of debt. I was in a lot of school debt. And I think it was like 84 grand. And I job hopped a lot. And every time I job hopped, I bumped my salary up. I was an engineer from a technical school. And obviously technology is really important in the marketplace. So I did very, very well. And so eventually I landed at a company called Cognex. And Cognex's motto is work hard, play hard. And it was basically like all engineers. And I did inside sales team there. Then I got promoted to outside sales. Fast forward, it's 2016 or 2015. I want to say 2016. And I'm in New Hampshire with my little cousin. We were playing Call of Duty. And I think it's like a Friday night or something like that. We're going to TGI Fridays. So it's up in New Hampshire. And it was that really bad winter where, like in New England, the snowbanks were up above the signs. It was like a horrible winter, tons of potholes. And there's a fork in the road. I thought the road stayed right. It actually stayed left. I end up on the wrong side of the road.
Oh my God. I'm
looking down at the GPS. I look up. And I see the brightest lights I'd ever seen. Huge lift-kitted truck. I thought it was an 18-wheeler, honestly, at the time. It wasn't. It was just a big lift-kitted truck, but it was right in front of me. And so for anyone who's had a life or death situation, you kind of understand what I'm saying. But basically in that moment, I actually had this is it. There's no way I survived this. There's no way we survived this. This is the end. And it was like inexplicable to anyone who's never experienced it. Fortunately, I'm driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat because I was big on saving money. I got out of debt, all my debt in 2014. And so I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I used to call it the Tank. German engineered car, steel. I used to call it a steel trap, the Tank. And fortunately, it was a really, really safe car. And both airbags did deploy. So yeah, seriously, my cousin and I he hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face. But remember, circle back. So my father, when he was 28, passed away in a car accident. I've seen the pictures of his car, and in my speeches, I show the pictures of my car because this is not a fender bender. I mean, this car is completely totaled. And I was messed up after this. I remember sitting in an armchair, drinking whiskey at my cousin's place, and just questioning my entire life. I'm 26 at the time. My father passed away in a car accident when he was 28. And I am messed up. Now, the reason I'm messed up, at the time, I didn't fully understand this, but now I totally do. And I live by this quote now. You cannot see the stars during the day. They are always there, but sometimes it takes the darkness to see clearly that which you simply could not within the light.
Wow.
I was in the emotional dark, big time. Regret, tons of regret. Because it was like, am I proud of the man I have become? Am I proud of my choices? I got all the success, beautiful girlfriend, amazing job, 6-figure salary, all this stuff. I got everything I thought I wanted, tons of college friends, tons of corporate friends, tons of high school friends still, like, you know, all of that. And I just had all this regret. And I thought to myself, so the 2 stars that I saw, because when you're in deep pain, you can either escape into a vice or you can develop a virtue. Most of us try to escape pain rather than like really sit in it and contemplate. Because when you succeed, you celebrate. When you fail, you contemplate. And so I was contemplating my entire life. 2 stars I saw. One of them was Tony Robbins' TED Talk. Still the best TED Talk in the world, I believe. Unbelievable. So good. I've watched it countless times since. The second star I saw, and the more important star, was a book by Bronnie Ware called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Have you ever read it?
I've heard of the book for sure. I should read it.
Bronnie Ware, we actually had her on the show, which was such a dream come true. I was the biggest fanboy ever. But basically, she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Super famous book.
Yeah.
She worked in hospice for 8 years with the terminally ill. She thought her job was to take care of them physically, when in reality, her real job, she realized later, was to listen. And they all said, I wish, I wish, I wish. They were all reflecting on their life, with unpacking and confiding in her with their regrets. And she saw these common patterns of like all of these terminally ill people have the same regrets. So she wrote a book. That was her calling. And to this day, I have a flashcard that's always in my pocket. I'll be honest with you, it's literally right over there on the desk over there. I took it out of the pocket when I got to studio, but it's got the top 5 regrets of the dying on it. The number 1 regret of the dying is so powerful. It's, I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. Now, remember, my mom was planting dreams in my heart. I love that. That's great. But I think I was doing it because it was what I thought I was supposed to do, rather than really listening to that inner calling. And so that's really the call to action for everybody out there. If you've ever seen a movie, there's always a call to action. For anyone listening, you're like, the only thing I can tell you is that I got a second chance like my dad did not. And I turned it all around. I mean, 26 to 32, those 6 years, I'll tell you what, personal development, I just went all in, and I went all in on my dreams, and I never looked back. And here I am, way more fulfilled. Before, I had a very pleasure-centered life and didn't know it. I was it was all about fun and partying and people and events. Now it's just a fulfillment, growth-centered life about growth and contribution. And I'll tell you what, fulfillment is what I optimize for now. Life is about choices. I optimize for fulfillment. And I think that pleasure is something I have along the way, but it's certainly not something I chase anymore. So life's about choices, and that's how it all started.
Amazing story. I mean, what I really love about this, Alan, is when people, have these kind of close to death situations, that's when, a lot of realizations occur. So you could have gone anyway after that incident, or you could have just forgotten about it and carried on with your life, focusing on what this world calls as successes. The way people measure successes in the world is very different, right? And you were doing that up until you met with that accident. You were trying to please and put that checkbox next to all the successful items that the world thinks is the right standard for success. But once you actually met with that accident and started contemplating on what were the things that you were doing right and wrong, you decided that you were not living a life that is true to you. And was that like, watching that TED Talk and reading the book were like your aha moments, right? That this is now time for you to re-gauge your life and do something different. So what were some of the things you started doing differently, Alan?
Oh, I mean, literally everything. And I don't want to make this like a movie montage where you see the person working out and all of a sudden they're reading books and they're getting their life together, like making their bed, right? But it was kind of like that a little bit. It was just like, I'm in deep emotional pain and I have to change. And really the best way to describe it is the unexamined life is not worth living. And I used to I'm really good at goal achievement. And I'm just going to say that. I mean, I've always been good at that. But I think that I was shooting for goals that I didn't understand the implications of those goals. So for example, I think all of us are actually an amalgamation of 3 main things. I think we have core aspirations, which is our goals and dreams. We have our core values, which is the way we show up in the present, integrity with self. And then we have core beliefs. And I coach now, and that's always what I need to understand is like, if I know your core aspirations, core values, and core beliefs, I can help you become aligned with it. I can help you align with those. And so in hindsight, my core aspirations drove me a lot more than my core values. I didn't really check in here of like, because, and this is an extreme example, but imagine someone who intends to be a millionaire, great goal. But if you do it selling cigarettes, you're going to feel terrible about yourself. Right. So, and I didn't sell cigarettes, but the point is that I was in industrial automation, and the better I did, the less jobs there were for people who need jobs. And industrial automation is going to happen with or without me. But if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so now I'm all in on education because I want to help people equip themselves for the future, because automation is coming and it's coming fast, and you will be automated if you don't have the skills and the education and the mind. So, but to answer your original question, what did I start doing? I started reading books regularly. I just started absorbing books, Audible, hard copy books. I mean, I just started spending, I've spent a lot of money on books. What else? I started taking online courses. I started fitness. Fitness was big for me. I started really going all in on fitness. And one of the things that I haven't talked to you about yet is that I had a drinking challenge. When you say you had a drinking challenge, I think people assume you drank a fifth of vodka every day. No, nothing like that. But I definitely was I was more controlled by it than I controlled it. It was definitely a pain avoider for me. And I grew up around a lot of drinking. And so I quit drinking. Now, I often say, thank you. Yeah. So I'm 3 years sober now, almost 3 years sober now. But I often say it took me 5 years to quit drinking because I fell off a few times. I'd go to a wedding. Yeah. And then I went back. Weddings were my thing. It was like, damn, drank again. Right. I said I wouldn't do this. And you're hungover the next day and you're like, damn, this sucks. But anyway, so it took me 5 years to actually get to the point where now I don't drink at all. And now I'm 3 years sober. But that was another thing that I really changed is I took fitness way more seriously, my health and fitness. And then I stopped drinking, which those two went together really well because basically what I did is I Miyagi'd myself, for lack of better phrasing, which is I basically made a big part of my life was drinking. And what's the worst thing for fitness? Drinking. So basically I made fitness a priority, which made drinking worse. And so that's one of the biggest changes I made is I took my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Like I made that number one.
That's the top priority. Yeah.
Yeah. And it still is. It used to be chase externals, pursue externals. Now it's focus on growing and developing my character, my integrity, my physical, my mental, my emotional, and my spiritual development, and then attract success rather than pursue it. And I think that's been the main shift.
Sure. So once you started working on your internal self at different levels, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, you started becoming a better person. So what kind of career decisions you started making differently? Back then you were working with this automation company, right? So what radical change happened to your career afterwards?
To my career. Yeah. So I started a business called Alan Lazaros LLC. And it was basically the tagline was what you'll never learn in school, but desperately need to know. And desperately was in all caps because I just kind of woke up and I realized it's like, okay, well, we use money every day of our lives. And I didn't learn anything about money until my master's degree. We use food every day of our lives. And I didn't learn anything about nutrition in school. Right. True. And it's like we have relationships, intimate friends, family, clients, colleagues, all that. And it's like, we didn't really learn anything about relationships. And so go figure, health, wealth, and love for next level you. It's like health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Wealth, how you make your money. In other words, what do you do to make money? Do you love it? Is it a passion with purpose? Number two, how much do you make? And is that increasing over time or decreasing? And then where do you invest that money? Back into the business, friends, family, all that. Then you have your relationships, love, health, wealth, and love. And love is basically self-love, like your relationship with yourself, intimate relationship, friends, colleagues, all of that. And so back then, I was working for an industrial automation company. I started going all in on personal development and reading all these books. And I started realizing more and more and more that I didn't belong there and that was not my calling. And so I quit Cognex. I had a solid nest egg and I had a lot of investments as well. And so for those entrepreneurs out there, make sure you have a good nest egg because it will take you longer than you think to be profitable.
And it also takes the stress out of your head, right? That you have to pay the bills the next month because now you have that cushioning period to really think and go deep inside you and figure out what should you be doing.
Yeah. Necessity is important, right? I think we are driven by necessity, but I think that too much necessity just becomes overwhelming pressure and we can't be creative. And then we end up doing something for money rather than for passion.
Right.
We often talk about on the show, like turn your passion into profit. Don't find what's profitable and then try to make it passion because it's probably not going to work that way. But basically what I did is I started a little company called Lazaros LLC. And it was basically like, I want to bring personal development to as many people as I can. And I especially want to teach high school students, college students, like the things that they didn't learn in school. Turns out that doesn't work well when your tagline is what you'll never learn in school, but desperately need to know. And then schools are what you need to hire you. So it turns out that didn't work so well. So eventually I started a company, a podcast called Conversations Change Lives. Because I looked at my life and I was like, I've always been contemplating life and it was always deep intellectual conversations that like really gave me the distinctions I needed with mentors and all that. And then I met up with Kevin and Kevin had a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And that was about hyperconscious. If you look it up in the dictionary, it means to be acutely aware. And it was also about deep conversations. He had me on as a guest 2-3 times. And eventually it was like, dude, we should just team up. And then eventually it was the Hyperconscious Podcast meets Conversations Change Lives podcast. And it was like, okay, that name sucks. So we eventually just became the Hyperconscious Podcast. And for the first 400 episodes, we were the Hyperconscious Podcast. And then we rebranded to what we are today, which is Next Level University. And I love the pun Next Level U. And I remember my girlfriend asked me, like, what are you most proud of about the podcast? And I said, we have 500 episodes. And every single one of them is about how to be a better person, a better version of yourself. And that's what I'm most proud of. We don't talk about the weather. We don't talk about cars. We don't talk about comedy. Like we talk about self-improvement forever, always. Holistic self-improvement, health, wealth, and love. And so that's all the shifts in my career. So I just condensed 6 years into like 6 minutes.
This is amazing, Alan, because a lot of times people go through internal transformations and they benefit out of it. But when it comes to teaching that to others and helping others, that's where the self-doubt and the problems start. So did you ever have that self-limiting belief that am I really as big as Tony Robbins to teach about this subject? Or can I just go ahead and help others anyway?
I finally understand that. And I feel like for the first time, I can answer that question in a way that paints the whole picture. I've always had self-belief, always. And honestly, my definition of self-belief is one's belief in their own ability to achieve anything they set their mind to, obviously within reason. Like I'm not going to beat LeBron James at basketball, right? But like within reason. And I've always had that in spades, always. And I can't pretend that I haven't. I just always have. What I do realize now is that self-worth was never actually that high. And so, yes, I did deal with what you're talking about. I never doubted, and I never have, honestly. This is like weird because I do know this is rare. I've never doubted my long-term abilities. Like genuinely, and I can say this authentically, Kevin and I will have the most successful holistic self-improvement podcast in history. I just will work forever for that. And that's the goal. And I have no doubt we can do it. So, but what I will tell you is that self-worth is different than self-belief. And so, I struggled with the self-worth piece. And because I this is the way that I describe self-worth. Self-worth is, imagine you have a beautiful home that you've invested so much time and money into making beautiful, and you renovate the kitchen, you landscape, and you redo the basement, and all of a sudden, because you even though you worked so hard and you believed you could build it, you have a frat party and you let people like spill beer all over the carpets and ruin your bathrooms and all that stuff. That's what people with low self-worth allow to happen. They get walked on. They
Hmm.
tolerate. I have this great quote I use, which is, givers need to set limits because takers have none. And for anyone out there right now, if you're into personal development, which you are because you're listening to this, I promise you there are takers in your life that you don't realize are takers. And I'm the bearer of bad news. There are wolves in sheep's clothing for sure.
Hmm.
I think there are 4 types, and I'll go into them very quickly. Type 1 has high self-belief,
Hmm.
but low self-worth. This is me. These are the achievers of the world. These are the people who don't feel valuable unless they're achieving. You know,
Right.
I was 8th in my class. If you don't know your class rank, you're probably not type 1. My class rank was 8 because I was trying to prove my worth, right? I'm not worthy
Right.
unless I'm the best, right? So, blah, blah, blah. These are the achievers. They have tons of self-belief, but they kind of get ostracized because self-belief is rare. And so the
Hmm.
people without self-belief, type 2, tend to walk on them. So type 2 has low self-belief, high self-worth. This
Hmm.
is what I call the delusionally entitled. These are the people, everyone think about that person in high school, not trying to be mean here. Think about that person in high school who just felt like they thought the world of themselves. They just thought they were so cool and so awesome, even though they had like very little merit. Like they
Yeah.
didn't do well in school. They didn't try hard. They just kind of showed up. This
Right.
is like the spoiled kid syndrome. It's like
Hmm.
they just think the world revolves around them and they're very
Hmm.
narcissistical, and it's type 2. So that's type 2. High self-worth with very low self-belief. And by the way, if you have low self-belief and you want the tallest building, Tony Robbins talks about how you have to knock down everyone else's building. So
Hmm.
subconsciously, whenever they get in the room with someone whose light is really shining, they try to
Hmm.
dim their light. You got to
Oh,
be
got it.
careful. Got to be careful. All right. So type 1 is the achievers. These are the heroes. Type 2 are in my opinion, the villains, the ego. And we've all been all types, but we all have a main home. Type 3. And I've been guilty of being the villain at times too, by the way. Okay.
Hmm.
Type 3. These are the victims. These are people with low self-belief and low self-worth.
Hmm.
These are the people who literally will do anything for love. They'll do anything to belong. These are the obligers and the appeasers. These are the people that they just want to fit in and be loved so badly that they'll do it to their own detriment.
Right.
And by the way, type 2 find and prey on type 3.
Hmm.
Type 4 is the best type. Type 4 are people with high self-belief and high self-worth. And I can finally say now, looking back, I started to become type 4
Hmm.
as I started to lean into my dreams. And by the way, as I started getting rid of the toxic relationships.
Hmm.
Every relationship out there is feeding you or bleeding you. And I do this with my clients. I say, okay, you're going to write 3 columns. Column 1, the people who sincerely, consciously and subconsciously want to see you succeed.
Hmm.
Okay. It's a short list, by the way. Be careful. Number 2, apathy. People that don't really care if you win or lose, they're going to love you either way.
Right.
Like they don't take wind out of your sails, but they certainly don't how are your dreams going? Right.
They don't add also.
Yeah. They don't add also. And that's fine. That's fine. Those are the type 3s probably, by the way. Now the 3rd column, these are the type 2s. You got to be careful. These are the people who genuinely, their subconscious insecurity doesn't want to see you succeed, because if you do, it would be a spotlight shining down on them. They're afraid to lose you, so they keep you small.
Hmm.
Because they know if you had self-worth and self-belief, you'd leave them.
Right. So the
And
best way to increase our own self-worth is to get rid of these
yes,
type 2 people.
yes. If you're a type 1 out there, you have a lot of self-belief and you want to talk about your goals and dreams with your friends, but every time you do, it makes them uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And so you stay small because it makes other people insecure to talk about the future.
Yeah.
And because of that, you never feel like you belong. And because of that, you have low self-worth.
Hmm.
If you're not hyper conscious, you're not super aware of this, I've found no exception to this rule yet. My clients who have the highest aspirations have the lowest sense of belonging and the lowest sense of self-worth.
Hmm.
And the people who have low self-belief are trying to gain self-belief from them. So they surround themselves with type 2s, but the type 2s never give them credit. It's like they can't be happy for your success. They can't, because if they were, then they'd have to take off this cloak of perception. So type 2 are the people who literally can never be a student. They're always the master, right? They're always the leader. Like they're the expert in everything. I have one friend who literally has never been consistent in the gym in his entire life. Never once. Never once. The most he's ever gone is like 2 times in a row, right? I've been doing fitness for 6 years. He like tells me how to deadlift because like his brother was a personal trainer, right? That's a type 2. It's basically like an expert, a pretend expert at everything.
Yeah.
You got to be very careful. What we want to become is type 4. Now, the type 1s are the heroes. The type 2s are the villains. The type 3s are the victims. The type 4s are the guides. Every movie has all 4 of these types. Titanic, Cal was type 2, the arrogant asshole. Pardon my French. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then Kate Winslet was the hero. She was type 3, no self-belief, no self-worth, wanted to kill herself on the back of the boat. Leonardo DiCaprio, type 4, high self-belief, high self-worth. Even though he didn't have much, he was still a guide. Said, no, don't do that. That's not like, why does this woman think she has no way out? Right. She became type 1, started to believe in her own ability to get out thanks to the guide. And then eventually by the end of the movie, she's type 4. And unfortunately, and that's why she says he saved me in every way a man can save a woman. And beautiful movie, unbelievable story. But basically, we all have been all 4 types at times. And I've definitely been guilty of being type 2. It's sort of like unmerited self-worth. It's like you just, it's ego. It's basically an inflated view of self. It's a egocentric, everything revolves around me type of way to be. And it's usually stemmed in insecurity and trauma.
Wow, this was like a masterclass by itself, and it really elevates our self-consciousness on what kind of a person are we at this point of time and who are we surrounded with. So this was really brilliant. So the next thing I wanted to ask you, Alan, is about when you actually got started with your podcast. You had a very clear purpose, right? You were driven by helping other people also improve their self-development goals. But did you also have a business plan in mind, or was this a way to just serve without thinking of the profits?
Ooh. To answer that question authentically, I'll tell a quick story. So Kevin and I spent some time with a mentor. It was called the Business Launch House down in Florida. We spent the entire month of December in 2018 down there, pre-COVID. And we were driving. We went to visit a friend and podcast with a friend down in Hollywood Beach, Florida. So Hollywood Beach, Florida is in the bottom of Florida. And Jacksonville, we were staying in the northern part. So it was a 5-hour drive across the whole state. And we were driving back from this really long day. And Kevin turned to me. We were listening to nostalgic music. It was like, I don't know, Stained or something. It was like saddish, melancholy music, not in a bad way, but just like watching the sunset and all that. And he turned to me and he's like, it would really suck if all this hard work was for nothing. If this like podcasting thing like didn't work out. And I turned to him and somewhat jokingly, but also serious. I said, Kevin, I've not thought about that once. I've never even considered the possibility that this wouldn't work out. I said, Kev, I wouldn't even have started this if I thought there was any chance we wouldn't succeed. So to answer your question, I didn't have a business plan, but I've always had a huge vision. Huge. The way I explain it is like, I'll be folding laundry and I'll get this impression. I'll get this like vision that comes to me of like what I'm going to look and feel like at 40. And I asked Kevin and I've asked clients and I've asked my girlfriend, Emilia, like, is that normal? My girlfriend, Emilia, thinks it's normal because she has it too. But like, Kevin's like, dude, that's not normal at all. Cause like it was, and I don't know how to explain it other than like, imagine a vivid dream, but only for a millisecond. It's like an impression. It's like, it's going to happen. And I know it. I don't know how or when, but I know that that's how I'm going to look and feel around the age of 40. And so when you ask me, did you have a business plan? I would say no. Did I have a vision? Massive. And honestly, I would never have started my podcast if I didn't intend to have at least try to have the most successful positive impact podcast in history.
Fantastic. This actually proves that if your vision is big enough, everything else, the plan, the strategy, and the tools, they will all just fall in place, right? You will get the right mentors, you will attract the right co-host for your show, and have everything else in place.
As long as you stay persistent and consistent, this is what I say. So If you look at a vision of the future, like let's say you've ever done a vision board, that future potential does exist. It's a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. If you believe in it enough and then pursue it, you'll attract, this is the key, you'll attract the right persons, places, things, and ideas that will help you manifest that reality. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Jim Carrey or whoever, like the vision needs to be there. It's like a GPS. You have to know your current location, your current wherever the GPS needs to know where you are now, and you also have to have a destination plugged in. Right. And that, but then it can reroute you to different ways. There's a lot of different ways you can get there. And the most important thing one of the most important things I've ever learned, not the most important, but everyone says that life is about the journey. And I do understand why they say that. I do. But what people fail to realize, and it's actually a little scary to think about, is that the destination you choose in advance dictates the entire journey. So if you're going to drive from Boston to LA, that's a very different journey than driving from Boston to Worcester. Worcester is like an hour away. And so the journey, and I've driven from Boston to LA, that's why I mentioned that. It's a beautiful journey. I drove through the Rockies and went to Vegas, all this stuff. It's like the journey is predicated on the destination you choose in advance, AKA your destiny, AKA your vision, AKA your mission. And so everyone's like, oh, it's about the journey. Just enjoy life. It's like, what you don't understand though, is that your calling is a future potentiality that you can connect to now and live in that calling, and then use your intuitive and emotional guidance system to keep you in alignment with that. And for anyone out there, that might sound really esoteric, but the layers go deep. I tell my clients this all the time. I'm not here to tell you what to do. All I'm going to do is help you align with your calling. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, like financially, in your business. Like a lot of people are just out of alignment and they know it intuitively, but they silence that intuition. Right. And that's what I did before 26. I was driven more by my prefrontal cortex than I was by my intuition. Right. And I was just out of alignment. I didn't know it, until after I think that's what regret is. I think regret is the soul's recognition of misalignment and trying to rectify that. I have a really positive relationship with regret because it's a good thing. I had regret. I had a challenging conversation with my girlfriend the other night, and we didn't yell. There was no, nothing bad, but I was slightly unkind, a little bit, not much, tiny, but it was still like, I regret that. So what am I going to do about it, Alan? Okay, I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to make sure in the future I'm a little more conscious of my word choice.
Yeah. It's such a powerful feedback mechanism, right?
Right. Regret is such we avoid regret thinking it's a bad thing. No. You got to get to know it. You got to understand it so that you can invest it in your future.
Such a profound thing that you just said, Alan. So tell me, as a final question, if there are, people listening, watching to this show, they are kind of doing okay in their career, whether it's their business or their corporate job, and they're not really sure of what's their purpose, because unless, they have clarity on that, should they really work out a way to figure out their purpose first and then, decide if they are on the right track and move ahead? Or what would be your recommendation as a first step to somebody who is not too sure if they really have a big purpose or not?
The first thing I would say to that fire question is you do have a calling. Everyone does. So yes, you do have a purpose, even though you're unsure that you do or not. It's just because it's you haven't listened in or tuned in yet. So there's so much. One of the questions that I asked, we've done hundreds of interviews at this point, and one of the questions I always asked was, what about you never changed? Because I think truth never changes. Because like even in business, right? It's like, well, now there's a global interconnected internet economy, but like the fundamentals never change. Truth never changes, right? Same with fitness, sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, mobility. Like the fundamentals are the same. Basketball, it's the same deal. So what about you never changed? That's the first question I would ask your listeners. What about you never changed? Especially when you were a kid. For me, oh my goodness, my insatiable curiosity to understand human beings. I mean, if you're listening to this, you understand. I've been studying. It's interesting. We had a neuroscientist on the show. His name's Stephen Kotler. He wrote a book
Mhm.
called The Art of Impossible. We're actually doing that for our next book club book. But he's like, this is the person that Tom Brady goes to get like 1% better, right? And Kevin and I, were on the interview. And after the interview, Kevin was like, dude, I don't understand. Like, you and him were like best friends. Like, I don't get it. How do you understand all that stuff? Like, how, because it was really hard for him. Kev, he hasn't really been studying neuroscience as long as I have. And I don't have a neuroscience degree. I don't, and I'm like, Kev, I don't know how to explain this, but like, I've been studying neuroscience my entire life. So of course it's going to be a little easier for me to pitch and catch with Stephen Kotler than you. It's nothing against you. It's just, this is who I am and what I am.
Yeah.
So I think I have a superhuman, insatiable thirst for knowledge, and I always have.
That's one thing that didn't change about you over the years.
It never changed. Never changed. The other thing is super deep conversations. I've always been having ridiculously deep conversations, and philosophy. I mean, I've always been sort of a modern day philosopher, trying to contemplate life constantly, all the time. I was a questioner. I mean, why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Like, status quo for me is like a big, big no-no. Like, my mom, I was such a pain in her ass growing up. I would like, why do we keep the butter out when we should put it in the fridge? Like, why is that way? Why do we cook this that way? How come we're doing eggs over easy? Why not scrambled? Like, I was just such a curious person. And I also think I've always been good at math, and I've always been good at like pattern recognition. So that's mine. So now what do? I apply that to business. I apply that to self-improvement. And I have this big diagnostic. That's what I do with my clients. I take them through it. It's like, what's the tiny leverage point that's going to change their whole life? For example, if someone's getting terrible sleep, this happens a lot. It's like, oh, all these bad things are happening. I don't get, and we find out they're getting 2.5 hours of sleep.
Right.
And it's like, until you fix the sleep thing, it will always feel like the world is collapsing and the sky is falling. Right. And so that's my genius zone. But for your listeners, to answer your original question, your genius zone, you and your calling, you already have signs of it. You just have to reflect on your life and look at the common patterns. Here's some questions. What do you love most in the world? Write it all out. Number 2. Okay. What have strangers said about you? They've come like, you're so good at X, you're so good at Y. The thing that you're amazing at, by the way, the people in your personal life probably don't want to tell you, or they've just become used to it.
Yeah, but strangers will notice.
Strangers will notice, and they don't mind giving you the compliment because they're not insecure. Number 3, what does the marketplace pay you the most for? What's the most you've ever gotten paid, and why? There's clues in that. Right. So for me, the most I've ever gotten paid in an hour is $1,800 for a speech. And it's like that. There's a clue in that. I'm a communicator. I'm an orator. That's actually not including some of my engineering stuff back in the day, but blah, blah, whatever. So, okay. And then the 4th one, what do you love most? What have strangers complimented you for?
What have you got paid for the most?
What have you gotten paid for the most? And there's one more that's super, super important. Oh, yeah. Okay. What breaks your heart? What injustice in the world like pisses you off and breaks your heart? For me, it's bullies. The type 2 who tries to belittle the victims and tries to keep this cloak of perception to maintain power. Dogma, like all these old beliefs that are still running our society. Like, the fact that we haven't had a female president in the US is so unreasonable. It's like ridiculous to me. And that kind of stuff, like old ways of thinking, they break my heart because the suffering. I grew up in some suffering, and a lot of it was old cycles of not either people didn't know enough or they didn't care enough, or some combination of both. So ignorance and apathy are the enemy. Love and knowledge are the cure. And that's what runs me. And that's my calling. But for you out there, what do you love most? What have you been paid the most for? What injustice breaks your heart or pisses you off, or both? And then What have strangers feedback? What if strangers come up and been like, you are amazing at that? Maybe you're a model or should be a model, and everyone's been telling you your whole life that you're gorgeous. And it's like, even if you don't feel gorgeous, it's like maybe modeling should be for you, right?
Right, right. I think this is such a fantastic framework that you've given us, Alan, to recognize our zone of genius and therefore also understand our life's purpose and see if we can align our business with it. So we are not just successful, but are also truly fulfilled. Thank you so much, Alan, for coming on this show and sharing all the valuable stuff. Where can people find more about you and continue learning from you?
You are so very welcome. Thank you so much. This has been a great interview. I love the questions. So regarding where you can find me, you can Google my name, ALAN space Lazaros, LAZAROS, and I'll come up on all the social medias. You can also find Next Level University on any podcast platform. We're also on YouTube. We'll come right up. You can email me at alan@nextleveluniverse.com. It's Next Level Universe, not university. So nextleveluniverse.com. And please reach out. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, between my assistant and I, we literally get back to everyone. So if anything in here resonated, we can jump on the phone for 30 minutes for free, and I can help you dial in your morning routine or set up a system of success, or we can just talk about your career. Like, I love to get to know people. I have a couple calls this week. So please reach out.
Amazing, Alan. Thank you for sharing all of that. And we're going to have all the links in the show notes. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.